Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Oh, did somebody say my name? I heard my name. Hello, Lynn Cullen. Hello, thank you very much. That's a little hot for me, Amy. I ain't alone, which is generally the case. I got myself a gentleman caller. His name is Jay Kholos. Kholos, right?
Kholos, right.
Kholos.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in theater. And we're going to be joined shortly by somebody else in theater. Tom is actually here. Hey, Tom, are you there? Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. I was worried when you weren't there right off the bat, and I said to Jay, maybe he overslept. Do you have his number? And Jay's response was, he's a professional. Meaning you
yes,
even at 7 in the morning, right, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for joining us at such an early hour where you are, but at least it's not 8 degrees where you are. Excuse me. Hi, this is Tom Dugan on the line, and Jay Kholos here in the studio. And these two men are bringing a production to Pittsburgh later this month that was written and stars Tom Dugan. And it is a powerful one man, one performer, one one act play.
90 minutes of Tom on stage as Simon Wiesenthal, right?
Okay. He says Simon Wiesenthal, I say Simon Wiesenthal. Tom, you wrote it, you play the guy. What's his name?
I have chosen to pronounce it Simon Wiesenthal because he has an Austrian accent. So I can say Wiesenthal, you can say Wiesenthal, and just as long as we get you in the theater, it's going to be all right.
Now, I did note that DreamWorks is looking to adapt your play. Is that true?
Yeah, we're in negotiation now for the film of Wiesenthal, and nothing has been announced yet, but it's looking pretty good.
Oh, how wonderful! How wonderful! The full title is Simon Wiesenthal, Nazi Hunter.
Well, that's not exactly the title,
no.
But
it's
Wiesenthal, but we use Nazi Hunter.
What? We I'm sorry, Tom, you were saying? What?
The title of the play is simply Wiesenthal.
Oh, it is.
We just use it because he was a Nazi hunter, so it's used in the body copy and underneath the headline, but the actual title is Wiesenthal.
It's just Wiesenthal.
Correct.
I got Jay to say Wiesenthal.
Yeah.
So Simon Wiesenthal, Nazi hunter, Holocaust survivor, and Tom Dugan. That sure sounds like an Irish name to me. What the hell got you interested in writing this play and also embodying him on stage?
Yeah, it is kind of an odd thought that an Irish Catholic kid from New Jersey would want to be playing Simon Wiesenthal. But I come to the story honestly. I grew up hearing the stories of my father, who was a decorated World War II veteran, and he received the Bronze Battle Star and the Purple Heart. He liberated a camp called Langenstein in Germany, and I grew up hearing the stories of what it was like for him as a child of the Depression to come upon this work camp and see these people starving when there was food right there. They just weren't allowed to eat it, and it made quite an impression on him as to how awful human beings could be. I always wanted to honor his participation in history, but I didn't find the right I couldn't figure it out. But the one thing that really stuck in my mind was we were watching a movie called Battleground, starring Van Johnson, and I think James Whitmore won an Academy Award for it. It was about the Battle of the Bulge. My dad was in the Battle of the Bulge. And my mom, said, hey, your father actually did this. And I said, oh, my God, Dad, you were in the movies? and to my disappointment, he was only in the Battle of the Bulge. So that's where my mom said, look, Bill, he's got shrapnel in his hip. So I felt my dad's hip, and sure enough, he had shrapnel in there. And you could feel it. And I said, boy, Dad, you must hate Germans. And he said, no, I don't. He said, I don't judge people by what group they belong to. I judge them by their behavior. Wow. Now, as an 8-year-old, I didn't really understand what that meant, but I had the idea that it was probably profound. Yeah. Years later, I was reading, and I'd become a playwright by that point. I was reading Wiesenthal's obituary in 2005 in the Los Angeles Times, and in it they discussed Wiesenthal's rejection of collective guilt. And a light bulb went on in my head, and I realized that's what my father was trying to teach me so many years before.
Wow.
And so I started looking into the possibility of writing a one-man play about Wiesenthal. There's another reason that I'm comfortable playing the part, is that although I'm Irish Catholic, my wife and my 2 sons are Jewish. So I live in my house, we live with tolerance every day. And I've been living in a Jewish community. I've been married to my wife for 27 years. I've been accepted as the outsider now for, close to 30 years. So tolerance really plays a big part in my life. And so that's why I'm comfortable playing the part.
Well, that's wonderful. And in fact, the Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles, right, there is a corresponding or in it museum of tolerance, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a very powerful museum in Los Angeles and elsewhere. And in fact, the Simon Wiesenthal Foundation is one of our promotional partners, so that in many of the towns we will visit, a representative from the Wiesenthal Foundation will be on stage with Tom. We do a Q&A, post-show Q&A, where Tom comes back out as Tom, and then we have a guest person, sometimes from the Wiesenthal Center, others that may be just very well-versed in the Holocaust or Wiesenthal or other subjects, and then also just, for example, we're going to be in Orange County the 12th of March. There was just an incident there last weekend with some kids.
Oh, that's a swastika.
Yeah, and that's brought a whole other attention to it, and we do have somebody on stage with Tom. That will be on stage with Tom to talk about that, and so the audience is going to be very involved with that. So I think, and Tom, you can correct me on this, but I believe you kind of adjust to the situation, and the questions that you get are not always Wiesenthal oriented, but otherwise oriented. Isn't that right?
Well, yeah. There's a curiosity about so many aspects, of the creation of the play and the creation of the character that I worked on along with my director Jenny Sullivan. But I find some fascinating moments. I've been doing the play for 10 years now.
Wow.
And it's at those talkbacks that I meet the most fascinating people. I was in Florida, I guess it was, and a man just raised his hand. He didn't actually have a question. He just said, I particularly like the story about how Simon Wiesenthal helped catch Franz Stangl, the commandant of the Treblinka concentration camp. And in that story, he said, and the $7,000 check that he had to be given to the informants in order to get that information. And I said, oh, okay. I said, so why is that story about the check? Why is that so interesting to you? He said, because I'm the guy who wrote the check.
Oh, wow.
He was
Wow.
Marty Rosen. Marty Rosen was Wiesenthal's lawyer and best friend.
Okay.
And they worked hand in hand to instigate some of the law changes in Germany, the statute of limitations that there used to be in Germany. They had that abolished, and Marty Rosen was essential in that endeavor. And so I'm happy to say that he comes to the show quite often. He'll be when we're doing the show in Boca, and he's coming, and he's going to participate in the talk back. So there's always these guest stars that come up and
wonderful
and fill in, their firsthand experience, with along with the questions that they have for me as a playwright and the performer.
So you are this production is being staged in cities all over the country, but you did not have Pittsburgh on your original tour. This is an addition.
Yeah.
That you're coming here. In
what happened was I was actually working on the tour, booking the. I work with the North American rights of the tours, so we're performing everywhere from Palm Desert to Montreal, Canada. So I was in the process of booking and locking in the markets, and we had already locked in a lot of them. And then the Tree of Life incident happened, and I think Tom and I had exactly the same idea. I was on the phone. He was trying to get me. I was trying to get him, but we said, we've got to bring this to Pittsburgh, and so we moved things around. I interrupted the basic putting together of the tour. We got some venues to cooperate and move things around, and we were able to bring 3 shows here, March 26, 27, and 28 at the August Wilson. So it all kind of worked out.
It's wonderful, and we're so glad that we have an opportunity to see your play, which I should say won the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle Award and was nominated for a number of other awards. This is, I mean, it must be a very powerful piece, Tom. Congratulations.
Tom,
thank you very much.
Yeah, what the audience will see is what I've seen as the sitting. Well, I never sit actually. I stand on the side, and any show that I'm involved in, I can't sit. But
you stand and pace.
I pace. I'm a pacer. Tom is up there doing all the work, but you'll see the audience is just for 90 minutes. Absolutely mesmerized. There's no intermission, so they're sitting there, and I kid Tom, to keep Jewish people quiet for 90 minutes is quite an undertaking, but he's able to do that.
No, it is. Yeah, you really, that's amazing. It reminds me, actually.
You can't do it at home.
No.
No.
It reminds me.
I can't either, by the way.
It reminds me of a story, actually, and Tom, you might appreciate this because I carry an Irish name too, Cullen, and I'm Jewish. And when I first came to Pittsburgh in the early '80s, some Hadassah thing asked me to speak, as I was a television reporter at the time. And I'm speaking in this beautiful home in the Squirrel Hills part of Pittsburgh to all these women, and I'm hearing these 2 women having an argument while I'm trying to talk. And I can hear what they're saying. Yes, she is. No, she isn't. Yes, she is. No, she isn't. I interrupted. I said, only in an audience full of Jewish women would I have to do this, but let me just stop the argument in the back. Yes, I am. Okay?
I was sitting at the Bagel Nosh in Beverly Hills, and I was first starting to do the show, and I just happened to go into walked in because I was going to go to the theater thereafter, and they had an advertisement in the Bagel Nosh for my show, and there was a photograph and my name, and I'm sitting there eating, and 2 Jewish women are sitting there And the one says to me, "So, that's you?" I said, yes, it is. And a little time went by, and then I hear, "So, you're not Jewish?" And I said, no, I'm not. But you can tell that because of my name, right? And they went, "No, because you put ham on your bagel."
That's good.
That's great. Oh, gosh. Okay, I want to, by the way, tickets available now. They're already selling for the show here.
We did 3
so
shows, yeah.
if you want to get in.
But there are tickets
and
available.
did we mention that the shows benefit
For Tree of Life.
Tree of Life?
Yeah, a portion of the proceeds go to the rebuilding of Tree of Life, absolutely.
Okay. And I was just being told before that their insurance does not cover a ton of the stuff. So yeah, amazing. They do need help. Can we talk about?
I think the way I understood it was that insurance covers the actual structure itself, the building itself, but insurance does not cover so much of everything else, including the pews. And then there's these bronze plaques on the side, on the walls, that have the names of congregants going back 150 years from Romania. And now these plaques have got bullet holes in them. And to me, that those plaques with those names on it are the roots to the Tree of Life Synagogue. And if we can help to patch up, replace those roots, I think I would be very, very proud to have participated in that.
Wow, I have never heard that before. I mean,
Yeah.
Obviously, I know that sanctuary very well. I'm thinking of those plaques with bullet holes.
Yeah.
Wow.
By the way, I do want to mention that we are doing a show also, matinee, actually. It's a free show for high school students. There's a group of high school students that have been invited, and they will be coming on Thursday. And Tom is giving of his talent, and everyone is kicking in, and so we're really, because to us, that's the other, the fact that we will have a very diverse group of students there is great. So that will be on Thursday.
The educational aspect of this play and what you're doing, really makes you a teacher as well as a playwright and actor. You're a teacher in this now. Is that in some parts the most gratifying aspect of this work?
I think that Wiesenthal's greatest contribution to society is as a teacher.
Yeah.
And so I set the play documentation center where he often had groups of students come in to his boardroom or whatever. It was a very modest office that he had, and talk to these students, and that's how I set the play. It's the final group of students that's come from the United States, and he's speaking with them, and so there's that. Every performance is that, but when they are actually students in the audience, that adds a very special vibe to the play. I'm very grateful to have had the best reviews of my life for this play, from the New York Times to the Los Angeles Times and everywhere in between. But my favorite review of all was a 15-year-old at the talkback after, and he didn't even have a question. And I think he just had something to say, and I think he spoke for all teenagers who come to see the show. And all he said was, "Wow, I thought this was going to suck."
That's better than 4 stars. Oh, that's wonderful. Let's talk, if we could, about this man that inspired you and that you embody in the play. He was a survivor himself. His family pretty much wiped out, correct?
Yes. Yeah, he lost like 80 family members.
And then he, I mean, my sense of him always was, if you come out of that and then you immediately sort of start looking for Nazis, that it's revenge that is fueling you. It sure as hell would be for me.
Well, he admitted that, yes, at the beginning it was revenge, but then he realized that it really can't be revenge. It's justice that he was looking for. He wanted to, I mean, after all the wars previous to World War II, everyone said, well, you know, everybody did terrible things and we should never do them again. But it was Wiesenthal and some like him who really, really put an effort into making sure that there were things that were enforceable called war crimes. And the type of war crimes and tribunals that you see in our society now, Rwanda, and, you know, all the unfortunate many genocides that go on and continue to go on. You hear about The Hague, you hear about, you know, brought up on charges. These are all of this that's going on now is directly attributable to the work that Simon Wiesenthal did in the 50s and the late 40s to make sure that criminals understood when they went down that dark path that they will have to answer for their crimes. There's a legitimate process that will seek them out and they will be punished. And his idea was to let the murderers of tomorrow understand that they're not going to get away with it.
So he was thinking in terms of deterrence, actually.
Yeah.
Frankly, I don't think that's going to work. I mean, it doesn't seem to, you know, people have to learn the same lessons over and over and over again, it seems to me.
I suppose, I mean, he was a naive man, but I suppose that what he wanted to do, and I think he did, was raise the human consciousness, just to raise the IQ of our society just a click. And I think he did that.
Gosh.
He was responsible for over 1,100 Nazi war criminals being brought to justice. But Tom, in the play, he actually talks about what a low percentage that is. What was it exactly? It was like 2 or 3%?
He had 22,000 criminals, identifiable criminals in his files when he's retired, and he brought to justice 1,100, which is 5%.
5%.
And he's ashamed of the number, and he calls himself a 5% hero.
Wasn't anybody else doing it? I mean, it's only in the whole world Simon Wiesenthal who's hunting these people down?
No, but he became the most famous because he understood how to he learned how to utilize the media. There were a husband and wife that Klausfeld, I believe, is the pronunciation, who were dedicated. They were French, dedicated to hunting down Nazis. Of course, Mossad did an awful lot eventually to hunt down Nazis, and so he wasn't the only one, but he was the most effective one, and certainly became the spokesman for all of them. And but I'll tell you what, there's a dark chapter of Jewish history where there was a competition, and I think the psychologists call it Holocaust ownership, where I'm a bigger victim than you are, and there was jealousy of Wiesenthal because he was getting so much of the credit for things, and others felt that they weren't getting the credit.
Human nature, God Almighty, it's
Yeah.
it's okay. So, you had mentioned the documentation center, that this is where the play is set. That was where he operated from, and what city are we in with the documentation center?
We're in Vienna.
We're in Vienna.
Vienna.
Okay. So he stayed
Yeah, the
over
place-
there. Yeah.
He did. He stayed in Austria, and depending on which way the wind was blowing, he was either looked on as a heroic character or the worst of the worst. He and his wife would go out to the movies, and people would just decide it was okay to spit on them.
What?
If you can imagine.
No, I can't. So
Yeah.
he stayed there though and took. Oh my God, he's the one who found Eichmann.
Yeah.
Right? He found Eichmann.
Well, no.
No.
He was one of many people who gave information that he had gathered,
Oh, to
and
the
it was
Israelis.
Mossad.
Yeah, Mossad. Did.
Yeah,
Right.
Mossad actually caught Eichmann, but
He aided
I
in the
was doing
capture
the
of
show
him.
Off Broadway. He didn't capture him. No.
He aided that, though, right.
Yeah, he aided, and then I was doing the show in Off Broadway, and after the show, I was some woman came up to me. No, actually, a woman was pushing her husband up to me, and I could see that she wanted him to talk to me. So the guy just came up. He was an unassuming guy. He was, in his 80s, and he said, "I liked your play very much." And then he walked away, and his wife was like, pushing him back to me. And he was like, "Please, Gladys, give me a break." And then finally she stepped up, and she just pointed at him and said, "He caught Eichmann."
You're kidding.
He was one of the 7 Mossad agents or 8 Mossad agents.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he was like, he just said, "Well, I was the guy who did all of the electronics. I put a bug in an apartment, and I did this and I did that, blah blah blah, and I taped his hands, but the rest, those guys did." It's heroes like that that's how you know they're real heroes.
Right. That's
They
right.
just don't brag.
No, they don't even want to mention it. There was something that leapt out at me. I guess I don't know what. I was probably doing a little research on him. But one of the people he found, I believe he found, was an American housewife living in New York City, Mrs. Herman, I don't know, Ryan. And she supervised under her German name, she supervised the killing of hundreds of children. And she's living a fine, wonderful life in America.
Yep. And I'm just all now going to my shelf in my book to find there she is. I got a picture of her right here. The Braunsteiner case.
Her name was
Hermine
Braunsteiner.
Braunsteiner, known as the Mayor, greeted the prisoners, whip in hand, as they arrived at Majdanek. Is that the pronunciation? I'm getting it right?
I don't know.
Yeah, she was known as the Mayor because she would kick children to death.
Dear God.
Can you imagine?
No. And I'm thinking now of the other people, these criminals, these killers who came to the United States and hid here in plain sight and were living their lives and then are found. And when they're found, they're like these old men.
Yes.
They're old men. And it really appears like the Jews are torturing these old men. I always thought I was always troubled by the optics of what I figured other people were thinking.
Yeah, that we should feel sorry for them or something.
Right,
But
no,
in
right.
fact, that I think is the Wiesenthal mantra, which is justice, and it doesn't matter that they're 80, 90, whatever, that they must be brought to justice. And that's why I think just recently there was another case of someone that was captured or brought to justice, I believe.
Right, in Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're in their 90s now,
Yeah.
and and it's like you just know that people looking at these poor old men are feeling sympathy for them, don't you think?
Yeah, Wiesenthal's greatest fear was that the optics of old people are vulnerable, and your empathy goes out to them because you see the fear in their eyes, and you see the weakness in their bodies, and your idea is to protect them, and this is something that Wiesenthal was very aware of, and made it very clear, and I make it clear in the play that this sweet old man. At one point I say, because during the play, he's trying to catch the final Nazi on a series of telephone calls. And the woman says that very thing. The receptionist at the hotel where this man is living says, "Oh, why don't you leave the sweet old man alone?" And he says, "Sweet old man? He's 61 years ago. That sweet old man marched 345 children out of an orphanage in France and shot them in the head." So it was an uphill battle for Wiesenthal, but he always had to bring up what the reality of the situation was rather than just the optics. And I think his goal was not revenge. It was seeing, and it worked. I mean, you say you don't think it worked, but I know for a fact that there are times when it worked, where despots and dictators understood that they had to cover up their crimes because they don't want to be chased until they're 98 years old.
Well, that's
and
yes.
they really didn't have free reign to commit the type of crimes that the Nazis did, because the Nazis didn't think there was. First of all, they didn't think they were going to lose, and second of all, they didn't think that Hitler himself said, because he talked about the Armenian genocide, and he says, "I'm not worried about killing the Jews. After all, who today speaks of the slaughter of the Armenians
by the Turks?" This is true. This is true.
Yeah.
And somebody else, I remember, said to maybe him, "No one will. You want to keep telling these stories or saying these things. No one, what we're doing," or said to him when he was in the camps. I don't know. No one will believe.
It was.
No one will believe what you're saying.
It was an SS guard at the camp, the Metzhausen, where Wiesenthal finally wound up, and they were sitting on the grass, and this SS officer was basically a teenager. He didn't seem to have any hate in his heart. He was just going along with the program, and he said to Wiesenthal, he said, "Don't even bother when you if you get out of this and you go to America, don't even bother telling people what happened here, because nobody's going to believe you."
Yeah, and you still have the Holocaust deniers and and what about the film? What about no? It was the Jewish media created all of that, and you still have that.
And what you also still have, given the reason you're in Pittsburgh, Tree of Life, is this growing and increase again in anti-Semitism. The exact same tropes and accusations and sort of attempting to, I guess, cull Jews off as a sort of separate and suspicious bunch and powerful bunch. It's all happening again before the last survivors are dead. It's already happening again.
The never again.
I just read in the Los Angeles Times this morning that since 2014, anti-Semitic attacks in the United States has raised by 65%.
Right.
France, I know, is going through that as well. It's
everywhere. Yeah. Denmark, you see British politics being roiled by it right now. It's everywhere, and so this. I don't know. I don't know. It's extraordinary.
Well, that's why I think that, in particular, the whole "never again" concept needs to be constantly reinforced, which is personally one of the reasons why I'm involved. I'm involved because I do this professionally, but to have a show like this that also just has such a powerful message that's really why we want to do as many as possible. I mean, yes, we want to do it because that's what we do, but also the fact that we're able to get this show out there and also encourage parents and grandparents to bring their children and grandchildren. And an example of having the matinee show here in Pittsburgh with the high school students. That's the only way that, I mean, what else is there going to be but education in terms of continuing to let people know that it can happen again.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
One of my the best compliments that I've gotten. I was doing a show, and I remember there was a Holocaust survivor. It was him. When I first started doing the show, there were a fair amount of male Holocaust survivors, and now it's mostly females that are still around. And this man said hello to me afterwards and thanked me so much. It was so sweet. He wanted to touch my face. It was just I don't know, a gesture of affection. And that night, that performance, that guy was sitting there again. And so afterwards, I said, "You came back?" And he said, "Yeah, this is my whole family." He had his children and his grandchildren there. And I said, "Oh, for crying out loud." And he said, "Do you know why I brought them back?" I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Because you tell my story better than I do."
Oh, gosh.
Tom,
and that was so sweet.
Tell us about what happened. We were in Skokie, a couple of months ago, and Skokie, Illinois was kind of ground zero for Holocaust survivors.
Yes.
I think 1 out of 4 in the 70s was a Holocaust survivor. So one of the things that we did was, of course, we always try to invite Holocaust survivors. So we had, I think, 10, if I remember correctly, in our audience, and at the Q&A, Tom had them read their names. I had them stand up. It was a very powerful, after you see what you see, and then have them being acknowledged by the audience. It was just a wonderful, powerful moment. And then we also had a war hero, right, that you introduced, Tom.
Yeah, we did, and I'm sorry I don't have his name written down. He passed away just like a month ago.
Yeah, about a month ago.
He had single-handedly a Jewish soldier from the 83rd Infantry of Patton's 3rd Army, which was of particular interest to me because that's the division that my father was in. And he was sitting in the balcony real close, like one of those boxes, real close to the stage. Anyway, he had captured single-handedly 21 German soldiers. And I started it off by, I counted that there were 21 people in the front row, and I had them all stand up so that everybody could see what 21 people looks like. And then I announced that, this man was right here as an American hero. And I was able to walk over and shake his hand. And you had, I don't know how many people, was it 500 people in the theater?
More than that, I think close to 800, actually.
They rose as one.
And they all applauded him.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know how often somebody like that gets that kind of recognition because they go about their daily lives.
Right, they don't seek it.
And, when does an opportunity like that come along? So I was so happy that he got that standing ovation. You know, like I said, he just died a month ago. So it warms my heart that that I was able to help facilitate that.
Again, the tickets are available at the August Wilson Cultural Center. I imagine the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust as well. At the and this is for performances on the 26th, the 27th, and the 28th.
Well, it'd be 3 performances for
us, not
yes, for 3 evening performances that start at 7:30 on the 26th, 27th, 28th, and then we're doing this invitation-only show for the high school as a matinee on Thursday.
Okay, we'll put a link to the August Wilson Center and the tickets on my Facebook page. Okay. Now,
young people are my favorite audience members. Young people.
Okay.
And I was doing the show and had a talk back, and a young person, not a high school age, but maybe 20. She stood up and she was quite emotional, and she said to me, she said, "Did this really happen?" And the audience, which was predominantly Jewish, breathed a collective oi. And I said, yes, it did. I said, and all the numbers that you heard in the performance are accurate. They've been checked and double-checked. So, yes, it all happened just the way it was said. I said, why do you ask? And she says, well, because when I was growing up, my parents told me that the Holocaust was a big exaggeration. And then the audience got a little bit more agitated. And I said, why in the world do you think your parents would tell you something like that? And she said, oh, because my great-grandfather was Adolf Eichmann.
What?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And the audience just jumped out of their seats. And it was a fascinating night in the theater because what did the audience have to do in the here and now? They had to practice the rejection of collective guilt.
That's right, because here's Eichmann's great-granddaughter. She didn't do it, and she came to the play. She's like, she's asking, did this really, oh, gosh.
Right, she wanted information. She wanted to know the truth.
Oh, my God.
And it was great for all, it was great for all of us. They decided, she was okay with the audience asking her some questions.
Wow.
But she was woefully ignorant.
Tom, don't you think? Don't you think the next Thanksgiving would have been like to be a fly on the wall at that one?
Yeah, you think your family being Trump voters is an awkward situation? Dear God.
Right. You think that's bad?
Oh man. So, Tom.
Speaking of collective guilt, whatever that
right.
means.
So there's lots of movies that have been made that include Wiesenthal, either fictionalized or actual. Right? There's Boys from Brazil.
Right.
And the Wiesenthal character there is played by Laurence Olivier, who wasn't Jewish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And then the Odessa File.
Yeah.
That
I mentioned those.
Yeah, and Wiesenthal was somebody who they talked to about it. Did he collaborate with any of those productions?
Yeah, they in the Odessa File, they actually asked him to play the part.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
And and he thought, you know what, that's really going to be cheesy. Yeah, and it went to another actor.
Because he's not an actor.
And also, Laurence Olivier came to see Wiesenthal to talk to him in preparation for the, for the part. And as it turned out, he wasn't. I liked my first introduction to Wiesenthal at all was The Boys from Brazil when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I thought it was fascinating. But as it turns out, Wiesenthal said, I liked his Hamlet more than his Wiesenthal.
I wonder if you would, since I saw this little snippet from the play, and I'm wondering if, I think it involved that funny story about Bolivia and a champagne.
Oh, yeah.
Is that a story you can tell now?
Well, I don't want to spoil it for the audience.
Right.
There was.
It's so funny.
He would get lots of help from people. I mean, people would, poor people would send in donations for, $5, just to keep his electricity going. So he got a lot of little donations. People were very eager to help. There was the story about how in the Odessa file, which starred John Voight and Maximilian Schell as the Nazi, where there was a couple in Bolivia who spotted his name, the character's name. I mean, the Nazi's name is Rashomon, and they thought they spotted him in a restaurant.
Well, because Nazis were found in Bolivia and
Yes.
are all over South America, so they think they see the guy. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And so they were very clever, and they offered him a drink and befriended him, and they got his fingerprints on the glass. And so they sent the glass to Wiesenthal, who had the fingerprints tested. And it turns out that they were the actual fingerprints of Maximilian Schell. These guys had seen the actor who played the bad guy and thought it was actually the bad.
Oh God, that is. Oh, but you know what's amazing about that though is that those two people had. Too bad, but they had the wherewithal to figure out how to get some incriminating evidence. Yeah. Too bad it was the actor who played the guy and not the guy, but that's incredible. So where were all these guys found? Yeah, all over the world, these people, as I said, they were found in New York City, they're found in Cleveland, Ohio, they're found in Bolivia, Argentina, everywhere, right? And governments...
Yeah, South America, Central America.
Yeah. And I think the U.S., the State Department particularly, was complicit in helping bring some of these people in and hiding them, frankly. You don't get into that.
Yeah, the FBI. Well, no. There's no... not really, but there were term limits, not term limits, but
statute of limitations.
Statute of limitations in the United States as well. And he asked Robert Kennedy he was just about to run for president to say something about it. And and he came up with the quote. Robert Kennedy said, "Morality has no statute of limitations."
Yeah, that's great.
And it was he really liked and respected Robert Kennedy for helping out. And the FBI has been a key component to finding and prosecuting the criminals. That I don't know how many there still are, but I'm sure there's plenty.
I believe there are a lot of German scientists, or several German scientists that were brought in for the Manhattan Project.
That's right. A lot of the scientists, the Nazi brain trust got scooped up and brought to the United States. Yeah, right. So Wiesenthal, he lived a long life, right? He died.
96.
He was 96 years old, and
yeah,
I always had the impression he had this big. Because there was a Simon Wiesenthal Center in Los Angeles. I always thought he was there working. You're telling me he was in this little office in Vienna the whole time.
Which we replicate on stage, actually. It's the office that he was, as he's retiring. So there's packing boxes. old furniture, metal file cabinets. It's a mess. But I assume that wasn't his priority. It was having a neat office. It was
no. I mean, the sort of the singularness of his, going after. That was, I mean, the focus he maintained for 70 years, 75 years, amazing.
Yeah, he was a kind of a one-man band. He ran the place by himself. He had 2 part-time secretaries,
That's
and then
it.
depending on what was going on, he had a series of student volunteers, and it all came out of his brain. He had all the names, all the numbers in his brain, and he was fortified by a Holocaust survivor from Scandinavia who remained anonymous. And he would send a check to Wiesenthal for about $10,000 a year to keep the office running, to keep the lights on, and to pay for postage and telephone calls. Then when that man passed away, Rabbi Marvin Heyer approached he and Marty Rosen, who I spoke of, and wanted to. They said, "Can we put your name on this Holocaust center? And in return, we will fortify your continued work." And so he agreed to that, and Wiesenthal and the Wiesenthal Center were completely separate entities.
Oh, I never understood
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes they didn't even get along very well. But what Marvin Heyer did was create a celebrity around Wiesenthal in the 70s and 80s, and he pumped him up and showed the world who this man was, who had been in the shadows all this time, really, and everyone rallied around the cause of this man's work, and so Marvin Heyer did an enormous amount of good for Wiesenthal, but they are and vice versa, but they were separate entities.
Thank you for clarifying that for me. So. Is it true I was wrong about he found Eichmann? Did he actively seek to find the Gestapo officer who arrested Anne Frank? Or is that something I'm making up?
Yeah. No, he did. It's the last story in the play.
In the show.
Oh, it's in the show. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
Yeah, Carl Silberbauer was the man who arrested Anne Frank, and the need for him to be caught and identified was to squash a movement in the high schools, in the German high schools and the Austrian high schools, where it was the beginning of Holocaust deniers. They kept saying that Anne Frank never even existed. And he made a deal with one of these deniers, this kid. He said, if you can find the one who arrested Anne Frank, and that guy confesses himself, then I'll believe it. So it was a real tall order, because you couldn't, it was like finding a needle in a haystack. But as you'll see in the play, he does manage to find this guy and bring him to justice. And that was possibly the most important thing Wiesenthal did, because, it just showed that it was the parents of these students, these doubting boys of Europe, that was doing the lying, and not Wiesenthal and the Jewish community. And the story that I don't get to is that, yes, he was arrested, brought up, and identified, but he hadn't committed a crime. He was a police officer who was told to pick up this family, and he didn't know that they were going to be killed technically and all that. So he was let free and given back his job in the police department. And Wiesenthal was determined to get this guy behind bars again, and so he was working on another charge to bring him up on. But this was in 1963, and Wiesenthal's number one assistance in all of his work was the media, and particularly the American media. And he was just about getting this thing going in November of 1963 when President Kennedy was shot, and nobody wanted to hear about anything but the Kennedy assassination and that investigation. So Carl Silverbauer was never brought back to jail.
Wow. You know, I had about 6 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, another playwright actor on this program who had written a one-person show and was here performing it. And her source was a diary of a young Dutch woman who was literally about a quarter of a mile down from where Anne Frank was hiding. And she had kept a diary, her name Etty Hillesum. Have you ever heard of her? It's mind-boggling, her diary. And in her diary, which she kept all the way to the concentration camp, she too, and this is what blew me away about this play, talked about not wanting to be seen as a victim and not wanting to get rid of her love of humanity. And all of her, in her diary, was talking about tolerance of even the people who would, and you're telling me this is what Wiesenthal was tolerance. And I'm thinking all of these people are better than I am.
Me too, because I don't think my nature would have.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah. You know, Wiesenthal said that the only thing that Anne Frank wasn't special.
No.
You know, she was just a representative of 1.5 million other kids.
Right.
So she was no special or more special than any of the other ones. It's just that's, it caught the public's imagination. Her diary caught the public's imagination. And that's why she's special.
Right. It's true, because you read Etty Hillesum's diary and you think, oh my God, she was killed at Auschwitz at the age of 28. An extraordinary woman and a really good writer. So there's those two that we're aware of, but how many others? But when you get to actually hear the voices of the dead through these diaries and see, you can never get your head around the millions, but just seeing one amazing life brought to an end so early.
There are the poems also that these children wrote, in fact, in Palm Desert, where we open up on the 9th, there's the butterfly poem, and we actually, in our stage bill, our play bill, we have an insert with a paper cut of the image that the artist did and the poem on the other side of the butterfly poem. So.
And this was done by a child in, I think, Theresienstadt.
1942, I think.
Now, before we finish up, as I see the clock is ticking, I wanted to just say this quickly, that when I first set out to write Wiesenthal, I thought, I don't think I'm going to succeed, because who in the world wants to sit for 90 minutes and listen to one sad story after another? I certainly don't. And so I cracked open my first book about Wiesenthal, and bingo, the answer hit me. Wiesenthal understood that too. Wiesenthal had experience as an amateur stand-up comedian before the war, and he understood the power of laughter and how when you tell a sad story, you got to lighten it up, and you got to keep the audience's attention and keep their spirits up. And I'm happy to say that apparently I have caught the spirit of Wiesenthal's humor in this play, and people are shocked that they wind up laughing so much more than they wind up crying. And everyone leaves the theater uplifted. It's not a depressing show, and I want the audiences to all know that. It's an uplifting show, and you'll be very surprised at how much you laugh.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's a great way to...
Hence the champagne glass story.
Yes, indeed. We took one of your laughs away right here. But thank you so much. What a great way to end this hour. Tom, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing the play. And Jay, thank you
My
for
pleasure.
bringing it to all of us and all over the North
Thanks for
America.
having
And Tom, I will see you in Palm Desert.
Yeah,
me. Terrific.
on stage. Okay, looking forward to it. Thank you very much again. On my Facebook page and August Wilson Center, the 27th, 28th, 26th, 27th, 28th. I'm not good at numbers, but go. And again, benefits Tree of Life. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.